it seems like people are beginning to take more recognition. Even here at the conference, management is a big component. It's not just the tools anymore. People are talking about the need to develop people, and that managers have to behave differently too. Do you see that? You gentlemen get out a lot, you see a lot, and not just with managers. I mean, in the hospitals and the factories and offices, are managers getting it? Is their behavior changing?
Managers are able to talk about it better. And managers are smart and they read books. And so now you can have a conversation with managers everywhere and engage at the same level we're talking today, in very sophisticated terms. But what people are doing is yet another matter. And I think it does go back to the extrapolation people made when lean production was introduced, and you meant something much more holistic. People took it as a matter of manufacturing, and then the tools. But I think whichever way you had gone, I think this kind of imbalance is going to come about. This battle between the social side and technical side goes back way beyond just the lean community. Absolutely. Same thing happened back in Bell Labs, I understand, back when Schuhart and Deming were there. You know, you have two different camps. The humanist school of how things work, and the technocrats. So this has happened, but I think to some degree it was unavoidable, and then we try to see that, grasp the situation of the community, and try to achieve some balance as time goes by. I feel nowadays that the pendulum has swung too far over on the kind of the management side. Again, when we did Learning to See, I was definitely in the camp of, Jim, Dan, don't you get it? It's a management system. It's not just about tools. But it is about all of these things together, actually. And while I see a nice trend in terms of people recognizing that leadership behavior needs to change and all that, sometimes that's to the detriment of the kind of changes we need to make in how people do their work. And anytime we talk about management in a way that's divorced from doing the real work, we're getting into an abstraction that's just going to cause further harm, I believe. So how we can keep this balance, a dialogue in the community, and how we can achieve balanced improvement in organizations as they try to continue to survive and thrive is simply our challenge. And I think that challenge really never goes away.
Well, you've noted that in an e-letter to the lean community about the don't forget about the tools. I mean, how many good pull systems do you see out there? And it's not that the practice of tools has become so perfect that we could just forget about them and move on to the management component. They still, as you say, they both have to be there.
Exactly. I think practice really matters. What we do really matters. And it turns out there's a lot of wisdom built into some of those tools. And that if you practice those faithfully, good things will happen, both in terms of finding good results, which energizes people. That's what we're here for, is to create more value, less waste, but also deeper understanding. And understanding that in order to actually properly implement those tools, you have to change your behavior at every level. That includes the person doing the work, but that includes also the team leader who's supporting the people doing the work. That includes the people who are supporting that team leader as well. And so, again, I think it's a matter of balance and thoroughly grasping the situation as we move forward.
How does the, I know Jim mentioned this in his keynote, and some others have alluded to it. How does the work of the manager and the executive change? There was, I think you mentioned management standard work as I wouldn't say the secret sauce, but as a key component of the change in behavior that management has to go through. What are some of the components of that?
Well, let's contrast what we're talking about, that there's a well-established system that we call modern management, but that is what General Motors in a way started and what General Electric finished, in which you had a very logical, rigorous sort of way of thinking about management, in which people at the top set direction, not necessarily with any consultation with anybody below, said this is what we need to do. Here are some measures that we will use to judge whether we are going in the right direction and making the right progress. And then everyone down below is supposed to make their numbers in one way or another, right? So very simple. In its time, this was thought to be a revolution, that Sloan in 1919 inherited a company that had, I think, 500,000 employees with almost no coherent management at all. And so he was trying to impose order. And there was always at the top this desire for control. and this fear that you were losing control. And the way you establish control was to set some very clear measures, and then you judge people. And you make your numbers, and you get to go up the system, and if you don't, well, you go sideways or you go through the trap door, right? So that's an interesting way of managing, what we would call managing by metrics. And it's amazing how much of that is out in the world. Problem with managing by metrics is that there are a lot of ways to make any metric. In fact, there are a whole lot of ways, most of them bad either for the customer or the organization, right? And we've all done this. Everybody who's worked in an organization and who was told to make their numbers has found some way to do it, not necessarily by doing what they knew was the right thing, but the easy thing. Because it turns out doing it the right way is usually harder, all right? So we've been trying to contrast with that what we would call management by process, in which there is actually a dialogue between a manager here, and manager here, manager here, and frontline worker here about, aha, we really need to achieve the following. Now, how are we going to do it? Let's actually talk about the actual method, process we're going to use to do this, and let's talk about what the gap is and why we're not going to do it on our current course and what we could do about that. John has produced simply a wonderful book called Managing to Learn, which is about this dilemma. And in modern management, that conversation between someone here or someone's here and someone or someone's here about how are we together going to do our work in a better way, that whole rich conversation just disappeared. And the big boss said, well, you know, I really don't need to know anything about what you're doing. And in fact, oddly, it sort of empowers people in a weird way. It says, just do it your way and make your numbers.
Just show me the result.
Okay, and I'm a big boss up here, and I haven't got time to look at all this stuff. So therefore, I'm going to give you some numbers, make your numbers, and do whatever. Get it done. And that's how we're going to run the world. So we have been trying to retrofit the world with a different conversation about how together we think about the way we currently create value and what we would need to do in a different way to create more with less. But that's a difficult conversation. It is one that people are not prepared by education or by the kind of general sort of culture to deal with. And so we're still plodding along, trying to figure out how you do this.